think I already told everyone this, but I got a septum piercing. It's my girlfriend made a joke the other day about like getting loads of metal put in her face to fill a void inside, and I was like, hey, because I'd like had just done this. But like, it's really, I was saying to Tim just before the show, like I've got a bit more disposable income now, and so like I'm planning some tattoos, and also like a septum piercing is a thing I've been talking about for ages. So I decided to do it. But the place we went, so I was seen by a trans woman. Like a trans woman did my septum piercing, and I didn't notice, but my girlfriend pointed out to me on the way home that she had a swastika ear stud, and like apparently it has like the little flicks on the end or whatever, so that it's the religious, spiritual icon thing.
The Jaina Buddhism one. Yeah.
Sure, exactly. And I just like this is not this is not okay just because you're trans to assume that like no, it's fine. No one would assume I'm a Nazi, but it's like, babe, you're white though. Like the thing is.
I always like find it interesting that people are like, we have to like, this was a big thing in the early 2000s in kind of like hippie tattoo scenes. There was this whole like sacred geometry thing where they were like, we have to reclaim the swastika. And there was like, this was a big thing. There was actually a really kind of transgressive artist that was like people on that in our audience might have heard of Man Woman before. Man Woman was like a huge kind of supporter of this whole like reclaiming the swastika and other kind of symbols or whatever, and they played around a lot with like gender and all this kind of stuff. But so in tattoo scenes, especially actually over there in the UK, it was pretty big. But I always find it interesting because it's like, this isn't really reclaiming for you, like for white Europeans. Like
yes, exactly. But then you
like,
get the justification of that if you're trans, and you go like, well, Nazis persecuted trans people, and it's just like, but it's just not the same, is it? Like
He's still white
because white people wearing that symbol came to a bunch of other like
they were doing other stuff because like
we need to reclaim the symbol from this like non-white culture. We need to take this symbol. It's just so shit.
And like if you go through like India and Asia and stuff like that, and they still use that kind of traditional swastika and stuff, like they never like lost it. It's still very common. So it's like they don't need to reclaim it. They're doing just fine. Like you can leave that work. Like there's other things that you can be
rest
reclaiming.
on this one. Yeah, just chill out, bud. This one's under control.
Like what is it? We'll talk about this later with the ZAD, but the whole like Breton kind of thing, like the reclaiming of the traditional.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of culture that you could reclaim and do the work against whiteness by being like, no, there are other cultures that whiteness flattened out. Yeah,
exactly. But we can get into that a little bit later, I think.
Yeah. Welcome to the show, everyone. It's my first one in a minute. We did take a big pause, and I wasn't on the last one because I actually scheduled ahead to not be on it because I was going to go to a thing, and then I had a crazy busy day and then just didn't go to the thing that was at the same time, and ended up like watching the show, and I was like, what am I doing? This is but like I needed the time off, but it was good. So what I'm remembering how to start the show. I've got it. I know what we do. It's been so long, but I know we ask Muel, what was the most cringe no. What was the most giga chat? That's closer. No. Muel, what was the most base thing you did this week or since last show?
The most base thing I did since the last show is probably step back from doing work. I think I actually mentioned this last time. Probably not actually. Just kind of step back from doing too much sort of activism because I need to find a job. It's just kind of one of those situations where it's like it's so weird, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit later because this is kind of what a lot of people were talking about on the ZAD, sort of like the relation to Labour when it's building towards something that is I guess revolutionary in nature or at least intentional living. you know, because when you do like activism, when you're like constantly doing volunteer work and thinking like, well, this is super important. It's, you know, we're trying to build a structure, we're trying to organize communities, etc. You don't really think of it as work, but it really is. It's labor. You know, you're moving around, you're doing things, you're organizing things, you're using your brain. It's like, you know, I didn't read a hell of a lot of Marx's Capital, but he talks about using your brain neurons and stuff like that. It's all work. It's all, you know, it's all tied to the same kind of stuff that's going on. Like I had a little look this week about polyvagal theory, which I think is a little like sort of
My therapist is so into that. Yeah.
Like I've heard some people like I've got a friend who works in another organization and she was talking about it and she was like, oh, I'm not too sure about polyvagal theory, but it's supposed to be really, really good for understanding your nervous system and how your nervous system kind of like affects your reactions to stuff. Like it's just very, very basic. Like when we talk about our lizard brain, that's kind of what polyvagal theory is. It's like you're basically looking for safe places to be in when your body is telling you that it's not safe to be somewhere, but you like don't quite know that you're in that sort of mode of feeling. It's just an automatic thing.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, so much of, and again, we will talk about this later, but like on the ZAD, we're having so many conversations about trauma and healing, and like Isa Framo, who wrote the book, she was going off to do a regenerative activism training because like so much like burnout is like one of the biggest things. But I was thinking about that. I can't remember who said it, but there's advice for artists about employment to get like a boring job that you can do easily and can just be a DOS. So that you can fund doing the thing you care about. And I've always thought it applies to activists. Like I just know so many people who've had like work remotely, laptop job, or what, like just whatever, so they can like just get the cash and then do the stuff they actually care about.
That's what I was doing. That's what I did at Allianz. So basically, taking sort of like a step back and just like focusing on myself kind of thing. And it's really quite hard because you're sort of there and you're thinking like, oh my God, so much bad stuff is happening at the moment. But you really have to like sit back and go, okay, there is like a hierarchy of needs that you need to fulfill, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like you need food, you need shelter. You know, in order to have those things, you need money to like afford them. So you gotta get yourself a job if you don't have one, or at the very least, like sort out your benefits. And the DWP are just like an absolute nightmare. So I've been focusing on that stuff really, and surprisingly, I have also been able to do a little bit of activism as well. I'm helping a member at the moment with some defense stuff with their landlord, and it's very like very easy stuff, you know. It's like a landlord who is not like massive or absentee or anything. Like they're quite hands-on, but they're not like nasty or intrusive or anything. So it sounds like it's going to be like a very like normal-ish sit down with a landlord, just kind of being like, hey, just to remind you, your tenant is a person. You know, and if you try and force them out of your gaff, they could die. So, you know, don't do that. So yeah, I guess like the most base thing I've done is kind of like assess where I'm at mentally and where my limits are at and where my capacity is at, and tried not to beat myself up too much about it. And that's been really quite good. So that is the most base thing that I've done since the last show. Tim, what about you?
Well, I've actually just gotten involved in the last couple of days. It's just getting started, but helping out with there's a local. It's going to be like kind of like an alternative to policing kind of thing happening in around central Auckland that is getting started up by a couple different political groups, and I've kind of come on board to help design. They're all going to be wearing like it's going to be like, you know, like how you have like community wardens and stuff like that, but they're all going to be wearing a matching kind of hoodie and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a thing that a bunch of orgs have been kind of coordinating on, and because we have similar things around New Zealand, like different trusts and orgs, particularly Maori organizations. We have like the Maori wardens that like will like be on the trains or things like that. But yeah, so yeah, a friend of mine hit me up and was like, hey, you to come on board with this and we'll, like this is the plan and stuff. And it seems really
That
cool. And
sounds
it's
cool as
like
hell.
in the area that I like work in and everything like that. So I'm like super stoked on that because there was a recent trial of an increased police presence in the area. And I don't think it was really that great. Like I, predictably, I didn't think so. But no, but I think it just like it was completely unnecessary. And even to me, seeing them around, it looked like they were just bored and kind of milling around, and were like, "Why are we here?" Because it's kind of like it seemed like it was more like something that our current government had kind of done as like a little kind of like political move to kind of reassure people that we're tough on crime or anything. So they were just doing these like little kind of like meaningless things to say that they were doing stuff, or like be like, we've deployed a bunch of frontline police in central Auckland or whatever, when it's like really that doesn't actually address anything whatsoever, right? Like that doesn't have anything to do with why there's people living on the street, or it's definitely not going to get them into a better situation. So
What a fucking
yes.
nightmare.
So they did that trial, and yeah, this is kind of like an alternative to that's coming up. So yeah, and I guess I'll keep everyone informed as that develops. But yeah, what about you, Soph?
I think it's been a fucking while. I'm just trying to remember like since the last time I was on the show, the updates.
Mm-hmm.
Because like um I mean life updates, my girlfriend moved in and that was like right before we had the trip to the ZAD. We've had the trip to the ZAD, came back, been like readjusting to that's something we're gonna end up talking about for sure is like the adjustment either side of going to the ZAD. But yeah, I've been unpacking loads of stuff. So I guess before all of that, but still after the last time I was on the show, I think I didn't talk about this on the show. I finished my training at the Harm Reduction Hub. So I was giving regular
Mm.
updates about woke school, as I call it, because that is just literally what it is. You come in for a lecture and they're like, "We live under racial capitalism," and next week you're gonna be doing drugs. It was great. So we had the final training, which was called the trial by fire, but it wasn't actually a trial or any kind of real test. Like we weren't actually graded even like pass fail. It was like so we went in really nervous about like, oh my God, will we do well enough? I'm sure if anyone had a response to like they had just been completely switched off in all the trainings and had the worst attitudes. And like in the role play, someone came in and was like, I'm thinking about doing this drug. And they were like, drugs are disgusting and drug users disgust me.
Mm-hmm.
Like probably would have been asked to leave, I guess. But like but it was actually just it was more like to kind of prepare us mentally for what the worst case um, scenarios can be in the hub, working with more police people who are very precarious. And so, like in groups of three, basically, we did different role plays where one of us is playing the person coming into the hub, one of us is being the hub volunteer to like test our training. Or put our training into practice. And then one is an observer, and then we all compare notes afterwards. And so there's like stuff to do with people who are having a mental health crisis, or people who are using drugs, or people who are doing sex work, or people who are homeless, right?
Mm.
And and like it was cool. I liked it.
Yeah.
Like because we rotated around there were 6 different scenarios. I said to Mule when we were on the way to the ZAD, like I kind of wish that I'd been the hub volunteer in all the scenarios. Like I went in super nervous, like, oh my God, what if I mess it up? And then like afterwards I was like, oh, I wanted to be like, I knew all these answers. I was so ready to do this stuff. And like, I don't know, having done sex work, being the hub user, like playing the person who is coming into the hub in the scenario where it's someone doing full service sex work like I was doing, who is in like a similar situation to me, and that like the hub user is coming in to say, like, I want to stop, like I want to stop doing this, or I want to do less of this because I'm having a rough time, but also like it's just hard to find other stuff. So ideally what I want to do is like do fewer gigs for more money, like, and I can do lower frequency but higher cash. And so you have to consider doing like really dangerous stuff. Like you have to consider stuff that is more, there is a higher risk of harm involved in it inherently. And like coming into roleplay, that was a bit rough, like talking to people who didn't have that experience. And I was like, okay, if I had been the volunteer for this bit, I would have been on it. Anyway.
Yeah.
So the training is done now. It's been a crazy busy last month, and then we missed the email for signups because it was so busy for this month. But next month is when I'm gonna actually start doing shifts. So that'll be my thing going on. I think there was a okay, the whole time I'm describing this, there was a more based thing that is like glaring in my mind, but I need to like think over how much of it I can share on the show because you'll see why if I do. When I explain myself properly, you'll see why. Anyway, for now, I'd like to note that I also have Tim's famous answer, I can't talk about it, which has been Tim's answer a bunch of weeks on the show. But we want to know what base things you, the audience, have been doing. You can message us through social media, or you can send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if that's okay, and we may shout it out in a later episode. So on to the news. Muel, tell us about the US and Iran.
Yes, with no degree of pleasure whatsoever. So everyone has been again terrified about World War III recently because obviously there's been so many tensions building up thanks to Trump sort of doing this shock and awe, not just in tariffs, which we'll get onto later, but also with regards to US military might in its imperialism. So this story is, like Sophie said, it's about the USA backing down from posturing for war against Iran. So Trump in the White House was sitting with Benjamin Netanyahu this past week, speaking in vague terms about having meetings and negotiations with Iranian authorities. It wasn't certain on the face of things what this was about, but of course, with the US aircraft carriers being stationed within striking distance of Iran, and Trump's threats to bomb Iran being met with a coalition of Gulf countries denying the US Army's use of airspace over their territories, we can only assume it's to ask Iran politely, or not politely, as is Trump's general strategy, to disarm and stop any nuclear weapons programs it may or may not have. This is the constant sort of thing with Iran, where all the Western countries are like, you can't have nuclear weapons, even though we've all got them. You can't have them. It's not allowed because you're a brown country, which is essentially what it is. In an increasingly weak position militarily, and losing allies by the day due to the tariffs, which we're going to talk about in a bit. The US doesn't appear to have much weight in a possible war with Iran. It's not just guarded by its allies in the Gulf regarding the airspace that we spoke about just then. It's also got a completely homegrown military industry. It's able to manufacture land, sea, and air vehicles, missiles, munitions. It displayed this in its impressive bombing of Israel at the back end of last year. Iran has far more weapons in its arsenal than the West generally gives it credit for. The strategy on display is not quite clear, but it appears to be that Trump is caving to Netanyahu's demands to start a war with Iran, seeing as this is what Israel has wanted for at least a decade, maybe longer. And Trump is appearing to poke the bear, as it were, making bombastic threats and statements to see how Khamenei responds. Netanyahu could be barking up the wrong tree at this point. Trump is now falling back to negotiation efforts after the threat to bomb Iran was met with Iran basically saying to all the Gulf nations, don't you dare let the US Army use your airspace, otherwise you're complicit and we will be, retaliating in kind. So after that, Trump has gone, right, well, okay, well, we're going to negotiate with them. They had talks in Oman last night that were indirect talks. So I don't really know the sort of meaning of that, but I assume it's through an interpreter, or at least like two different sort of diplomats in two separate rooms. Although apparently the Iranian diplomat and the US diplomat did speak to each other, according to the BBC article, the Guardian article on this. They had a brief exchange after the negotiations and the agreements.
Maybe
were made.
It just means diplomats rather than Trump meeting with Khamenei.
Yeah, I think that's what it means. Yeah, thanks, Soph. But nothing much came of the talks in Oman. These talks were presented as, Iran, please don't develop nuclear weapons. And Iran was going, don't worry, bro, we definitely won't. Wink. That's this. It's like a bit of a joke, really. It's like, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about in sort of questioning, whether Bibi's going to get what he wants here, because if, Iran are being pretty hush hush about, what capabilities they've got at the moment, and the US doesn't really know, then it's kind of, it seems like a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah,
So
I think that. Sorry, I was just going to say that I think that like they're the biggest Muslim non-US aligned country in the region, right? Like obviously Saudi Arabia is more powerful or like is richer at least than Iran. But like they're just part of the global oil infrastructure to the US. And I feel like, and then so obviously like Iran is seen as this enemy in a way that Saudi Arabia isn't. And then seen as an enemy of Israel specifically, but it's all covering, I guess, like the material thing, which is like control over logistics and oil in the region. Like, the threat of war is the way that the US negotiates with them, and so like, it sets the tone of the whole conversation. So we're just forever hearing about like, oh, there might be a war with Iran, and it just means we want to tell Iran to do something new. It's like there's never going to be a war with Iran. That's just the thing you go to when you want to say, Iran, please do what I want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, the thing to remember is that it is mostly going to be Trump trying to sweet talk Netanyahu, because, there is really not a lot that the US or Israel could do further in Gaza or in the West Bank. They are, all hell being unleashed had already happened. We spoke about this before. On the show, sort of before Trump came in, and sort of like questioning, well, what more could be done? And again, the proof's in the pudding. Not a lot, just kind of more of the same. Ceasefire violations. It's just Israel being Israel. But Israel is probably thinking like, well, we're fucked on the ground in Gaza because there's been such a resistance. We're also fucked on the ground in Lebanon because they got battered by Hezbollah when they tried to invade during last year. And the main big country that's supporting anything Palestinian and anything Lebanese and standing in direct opposition to Israel is Iran. They're the major power, as you say. So militarily, I'm not sure like how I think that most of Saudi Arabia's military power is in the US bases that it has there, rather than
for sure.
Saudi
for
Arabian.
Sure. I mean, the US are always calling. I don't know if you've heard this term, but like the US are always calling Iran the world's biggest exporter of terrorism, which is just an insane thing to say. An insane thing for the United States of America to be saying. But I guess, since September 11th, they're the world's biggest importer of terrorism. So maybe they do know about the global trade deficit of terrorism.
So
because they give funding and weapons to like the Houthis and Hezbollah and this stuff, but it's just like, this is just regional resistance against American imperialism being described as terrorism. It's the most classic like freedom fighter versus terrorist distinction.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good, good normal imperial stuff. So there's other things sort of that could be sort of taken from this story. A lot of people get very worried when they hear about war with Iran because of Iran's relationship to Russia and possible, nuclear threats from Russia, etc., etc. Russia has been calling for peace talks between Yemen. We'll go into that a tiny bit later as well, between Yemen and the US and the UK, saying like, this is ridiculous. Why are you bombing this tiny country? But, obviously the same could be said for Russia. I don't know. Anyway, regardless, there are allies against the US that are just sort of growing. There's a growing list of allies, of Iran because of the way that the US is conducting itself. And of course, like that, it seems to be that we're getting to the limit of what Israel and the US can actually do in the Middle East without dropping a nuke, because it's, we're seeing Trump threaten bombing and then that being met with this huge resistance. And we're going to talk about the Yemen, the Ansar Allah Houthi resistance to the US military in the Red Sea in a bit. I think it's very important to sort of look at this and go, there's a reason why Israel hasn't sent troops back into Gaza and they're just doing airstrikes. It's because if they go into Gaza with troops, they'll get battered by the resistance. They just keep losing troops, all the time against the Al-Qassam brigades and the resistance there. They still haven't sort of sorted out their defense systems. Israel keeps getting hit sort of on like an almost daily basis. We were talking about this 2 weeks ago on the show, like on a daily basis, they were getting hit by missiles from Yemen, and Yemen is so far away from Israel, and they're still getting hit with missiles from Yemen. They're still getting hit with rockets from Gaza, and of course there's going to be the Hezbollah resistance as well. I think they're on the ropes finally, and sort of just falling back on their air superiority. I think the long and short of it is, if the US or Israel goes Iran into war, how will the US fare? The UK defense ministers have been advising Keir Starmer that if a US strike happens from the Chagos Islands, it could have devastating consequences for any British military personnel and infrastructure there if Iran retaliates. Other EU allies of the US seem to be overwhelmingly quiet on the entire affair and have not been invited to the talks in Oman, despite being involved in previous nuclear disarmament talks. They may very well be alone in this fight if it does happen, the US and Israel. And I think Iran knows that, which is kind of why,
that would really create a striking moment in the decline of American imperialism if there's an actual war. Other powers are just going to be like, no, man.
Yeah.
Not this time.
Yeah. Yeah, because this is it. As you as Tim's going to talk about it in the next story. The US has alienated its allies quite significantly.
I was thinking about that with Denmark, right? Like, Denmark lost like more. They had more deaths per capita than anyone else involved with like Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff. Yep. And they like went over there being like, we are America's best boy. Whatever. And then it's just like I guess like that Trump's, I mean, this is what America has always done to its allies, right? This is literally what it did to Afghanistan way back in the day. And it's like, it's what it's done with Ukraine and everything, it's like, oh, you're no longer useful. Oh, okay. Well, like now we're just going to treat you basically like an enemy.
I feel, go on, sorry.
I was going to say, which is like, like what we're seeing a lot of with the tariffs as well, where it's like just people that thought that they had a great relationship with America, finding out that no one actually has a great relationship with America. America doesn't even have a good relationship with America. Which leads us into more talk about Trump's tariffs, I guess. The other week, obviously, everyone is probably pretty aware, Trump slapped a bunch of tariffs around. 10% global baseline with up to 54% on China as this kind of like, imperialist shock therapy to, deliberately destabilize the economy to try and reassert US dominance. Which is kind of like, and this is one of the funniest things about this is that they've put tariffs on totally uninhabited territories, which is kind of interesting. They've tried to spin it that it is so that nobody can create little like loopholes by going to these tiny islands where only penguins live, but there's been a lot of speculation about maybe they used AI to come up with part of this plan, like ChatGPT or something like that. Because
did you see the guy, like they suggested that to him, and he was like, "Haha, no!" Like,
and then you see people putting in like going on like ChatGPT and stuff, and being like, if you were to incorporate some tariffs, from the perspective of America, how would you do it? And it just comes out basically exactly as it is. But the interesting thing is we're getting these tiny little, penguin islands that are that have tariffs applied to them, but then there are actual islands in the Pacific that have got away with absolutely no tariffs whatsoever, which is kind of awesome for them. Niue and Palau, particularly, which this is, I don't know if anyone caught my tweet, like, oh no, it's a great century. I just didn't expect it to be Niuean. That's what that was all about. The Niuean century
Yeah, I was told this was going to be the
glory.
Chinese century.
Yeah,
What's
yeah,
happening?
yeah. But it totally
Whoa!
it opens these opportunities for, there's some dude with Niuean family that jumped on a plane immediately from New Zealand back to Niue and was like, grandma, granddad, we're starting an import-export business. Like there's some young king.
Yeah. Well, I for one welcome Supreme Leader. I guess I'm gonna Google if Niue has ever had a king. I don't even
Yeah.
know. Like,
So for context, Niue is one of the tiniest Pacific nations. It's literally like it's so tiny. It's but yeah, incredible. Like it's gonna be they're gonna be a funnel. Kind of like in the past, people have used the Cook Islands as kind of like a tax haven and stuff like that. So I think Niue is gonna be the new one. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, these tariffs are huge. It's like really disproportionate ones, especially on countries outside of the imperial core, like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, all getting like 44 to 49%, which is like, like this just shows how these kind of imperialist trade wars absolutely just decimate the economies of these small countries outside of, well, not small, but these it's not small countries, but small economies outside of the imperial core. So this is this is how these imperial core capitalist states maintain dominance by using weaponizing trade against smaller nations. And this is, like we see this a lot. This is how a lot of America gets a lot of Pacific nations on side for votes at the UN, just things like that. And it's the same with aid, it's this kind of soft power. But so yeah, it's basically a protection racket. A lot of people have pointed out how Trump's kind of like his strategy is basically a shakedown, like an old kind of mob style thing, which speaks to his background as being a guy that is
a crime guy.
Yeah,
I think
it's
some more news who just first started calling him just a crime guy. Like it's just
crime
always
guy Trump.
should remember he's just a crime guy. Like that's his
Yeah,
favorite thing.
Racist crime guy. That's always been his thing. Trump's weaponizing these tariffs to extort political concessions. And this is like we can see this with like the weird fentanyl stuff with Mexico, the annexation stuff with Canada, and it just shows you kind of like very transparently the coercive nature of these kind of this kind of diplomacy. So and obviously these tariffs devastate export dependent economies, like economies that are built to export goods, particularly to places like the United States, just waking up one day and being like, oh damn, that's like all of our core industries just
I guess we'll have a discussion in a minute, like at more length about this, but I feel like this is doing tariffs on literally everyone at once, even if he walks them back, is just going to make the whole world trade less with America. Like, it's going to be the longer term. Yeah.
Like all of this stuff is based on predictability. And so, so after announcing these, and it's also make sure that everyone knows this. I was reading about this yesterday that I think it was the first 48 hours of these tariffs did more to damage, to erase shareholder value than the entirety of like the kind of like lockdown periods of COVID. And so a lot of this has to do with reliability, right? And so now that America is not seen as being reliable, it's kind of like nobody is wanting to place bets on their future dealing with America anymore.
That's it exactly though, right? Like trading in futures, this is the language of the stock market, but it's also the language of capitalist growth. You must be able to make reliable bets. And America is just like not a reliable prospect if you're not in America. And so it's just if they put tariffs on everyone, and as I say, even if they take them away again, it's just going to be like no thanks. I don't really
Yeah,
want to trade with that country. Like,
exactly. And we're seeing this, and even all over the world, there's all these like, consumer goods that people are, a really good example is Switch 2. Nintendo announced the Switch 2, and then they've gone, oh, actually, we're going to hold off on releasing it because things are so uncertain at the moment. We just don't know what we're going to do. So gamers rise up. Um, but no, like that's what it's about, and it's
remember
not
what they took
as
from you.
yeah. It's not as easy as just like the idea is to they want to bring production domestic. They want to make America, like they want to go back to the glory days where it was like GM pumping out
We'll
cars, do all this kind of stuff.
we'll talk about that as well, but
Yeah, it's like,
I don't think that's true in any sense. Like they
yeah.
don't. Yeah, all right.
Well, yeah. Okay,
That's the
so
ad
that's
strategy anyway.
which is interesting because I've been seeing a lot of journalists talk about this, about different people from different industries getting in touch with them to tell their story. And one interesting one was some company that was really reliant on vanilla, like vanilla extract and things like that. And because this is used in everything from like food to like medicine and all this kind of stuff. And so they were like, okay, well, all America gets it all from overseas, and we can't get it anymore because it's just prohibitively expensive, or like the companies, like these people don't want to trade with us. So let's do it domestically. Let's start some like a vanilla industry in America. And it's like, okay, first you got to find the land, you got to do all this kind of stuff, blah blah blah, all this
Yeah,
kind of stuff, and then you
exactly.
find out that vanilla trees don't yield anything at all for 3 years.
Yes,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
just like there's all these little things popping up everywhere from all these different
Be
industries, people finding out
because of
like,
all those things, like shifting this much manufacturing, this much industry in-house, as it were, can only be recognized, like could only ever be achievable as an intergenerational project. Like you would have to be like
yeah,
training kids now to make this shift while you're like, and it would need central planning as well, but we'll get to that. But it's just like
yeah.
you
Yeah, it is interesting because it's like this is something that has been tried before. We were talking about this just before the stream. Just like, I mean, they ended it about 10 years ago, but Argentina did the same kind of thing where they tried to impose tariffs in order to bring everything back into the house, back in side, and it like was it was a tragedy. Like, I mean, it's like obviously it was like ups and downs, but in general they just like they were coming up with all these like wild deals to make concessions, which I think is what America is already doing, where they're like, okay, cool, well, we'll let Porsche sell cars in Argentina again, but in exchange, they have to sell some of our goods that we're producing. And at the time, they were like, oh, well, we're getting a lot of olives. So Porsche, you have to sell olives for us in Europe and America in exchange for being able to sell our car here. And then the cars
completely
were still
insane.
having to be sold for like twice the price anyway. So no one was buying them. And
Which, like, when we talked about Argentinian economics recently, like, I think we talked about this on the show, that they have like six, or they had until Malay, they had like six parallel currencies because they'd
yeah,
invented like the soya dollar, which was
yeah,
basically to like let their soy farmers, because it was such a significant sector of their entire
mm,
economy, let their soy farmers have one dependable currency that just they use.
yeah,
And like, this was because the main currency, which I can't remember if they used the peso or, but anyway, like their main currency just fluctuated so rapidly that none of their like most vital infrastructure, like most vital industries, could trade with it at all. But it's interesting as well because some of the parallel currencies were like clearly for international trade because they
yeah.
had like that they're inviting friends over and they're like, I'm so sorry about the state of my economy. Like it's really bad. Just you can use like a fancy different currency.
Yeah.
I don't worry about my currency. I'm gonna sort that out later, but you just trade with this instead.
Yeah, yeah. But the same thing happened over there. iPhones disappeared from Argentina. They struck a deal with BlackBerry though, so there was like this whole moment where they had the president like holding a BlackBerry and everyone cheering, being like, yeah, we made this here, we made this BlackBerry. And then after like a year or two, they stopped producing them there because they just couldn't compete with the black market of phones that existed. People just sneaking, or people bringing in phones being like, I'm bringing this in because it's my own phone, and then getting there and immediately selling it or giving it to family or whatever like that. And domestic production suffered as well because they didn't, like if you've got one car factory and you're competing with, these like expensive other cars that aren't really like, they're not really competition. So all of the, the Porsches and shit like that, the average person isn't buying them. So they found out that the baseline for what they actually had to produce that people were forced to spend money on was actually pretty shitty product. So like the profit incentive kind of like incentivized them to make just shitty cars that broke down all the time, and they were just kind of terrible. So it's like, this is why these things still don't work under like a like a capitalist economy, because you still have these other problems going on. But yeah, so eventually, well, like after a couple of days, Trump was like, okay, cool, we're gonna chill out on the tariffs, we're gonna extend an olive branch or whatever it was. It's like, no, we're gonna wave our white flag. And they put it down to 10% for pretty much everywhere, aside from like China, which they ramped up to, what was it? It was like 140 something percent.
145%, I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 125%. Yeah. And which is like so funny because they're like, China can wait this out. China, I mean, if China wanted to, they could start pulling in all the bonds that they own. And
I was going to say earlier, when we were talking about Iran, like if it would be a horror and a tragedy, and so many people would die if America had a war with Iran, and in no way should there be. And also, if they did, there would be this poetry to like the 80s. America was like messing with Afghanistan to bait the Soviet Union into Afghanistan to cause a political crisis, all of this stuff, to the 2000s when America came into the region and just kicked the shit out of one of the poorest and smallest economically smallest and poorest countries in the region in front of everyone, and just like no one could stop them because all the allied powers, like every part of American imperialism was joining in with this, like you said about Denmark, to then like 20 years on picking a fight with the biggest power in the region, Iran, while America is on the decline. There would be a poetry to that. But like America is already doing that economically with this trade war with China. Like if you were trying to make your country as healthy as possible while recognizing that the empire is in decline, you would be doing a lot to just like reinvest imperialist wealth into like just the infrastructure of your economy, like just the nice real version of what Trump would like claim to be doing. But instead, they're picking a fight with the ascendant global superpower economy. They're being like, fuck you. And it's just like, you're just going to get your ass kicked, bro. You are drunk, go home.
I literally just watched a video earlier today that was published like a couple of days ago. It's this guy, you might have seen him. He's been getting dragged in the Daily Mail as someone who does propaganda for China, but it's literally because he's just literally traveling in China and he's just vlogging. And he's just showing like what life is like, and it's not like a utopia or anything, but it's like in this one video where he travels he travels like from somewhere to Beijing, and it's obviously like hundreds of kilometers, but like I don't know, maybe it's like the different distance between like London and Manchester or something, but like just in that time period he comes across like so much like industry, like they're building their own wind farms, they're building, like he just sees a wind farm construction site and he stays there, and then he like gets a lift with a guy who's delivering iron ore to a factory where they like make their own like fucking power lines and shit, and it's just like, bro, this, you can't fuck with China, man. Like it's just not happening. Like So
but so we should probably move through the the next stories. But yeah, in general, it looks like they're saying now that the US economists are now forecasting a recession at best.
Right.
They were saying depression, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like if they can possibly pull out of this, it's still a recession, which is just like, yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to say, like, this is what I was saying before the show. My girlfriend was saying to me, okay, so my girlfriend's relationship to theory, she self-describes it as like she wants people to read her books and then tell her where to go protest and what actions to do. And she was asking me earlier, where, like, if you were Trump and you were trying to do the Make America Great Again thing authentically, you were trying to bring all the industry in-house, like what would you do? I wrote a little Tumblr post about this. If people follow my Tumblr, you can check it out as well. But I was just like, you would need so much central planning and you would need so much patience because you would need to be recognizing this is going to take fucking forever. And also that you're going to need to be able to have the state directly dictate to groups of workers, like, we need this many workers to sign up to do this thing and we're subsidizing it. We're just going to like literally create these jobs. Like, you can't do it with free market incentives. It's completely unhinged to it's unhinged to believe that you could. I don't think that many people do believe that you could outside of like Trump's cult, really, I guess. You'd want to start state-owned enterprises. Like what China does, like you would just copy it directly because they do a like market socialist or like, state capitalist thing. It's been described different ways. And you would deliberately pour government money into these subsidized industries to do this stuff. And instead just like tariffing everyone is nothing to do with it. It's like, I want to get super basic for 1 second because I've seen loads of people saying, like, talking like they don't even know what tariffs are. I'm not going to try and explain what, like, okay, I will do it. Conrad's telling me we don't have time for that. It's not my plan. I'm just saying that the purpose of it would be to like try to shift the balance of power in a specific trading agreement. Like if the UK did that to France, and then like there would be a trade-off in that we would be paying more for like, I guess, wine and cheese. I don't know what else we import from France. But if you do it to literally everyone all at once, all of your trade is more expensive and your economy is just on fire immediately and no one will want to trade with you in future. It's just a completely like, there is no way around where this is policy that's for anything but like making Trump richer. And I think people were describing this all as a rug pull. And I think it just is that, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. It definitely
It's just a
seems like
bizarre
that.
time.
Yeah. And I think there was, I don't know if you call it insider trading or like outsider trading, but there's definitely been a lot of that going on too. There's a lot of like Trump encouraging people on Truth Social to like buy the dip when the economy crashed. It's like, yeah, and then messing with the tariffs like hours later. It's like just it's pretty bold. I think any other administration in the past would have, there would have been some pretty heavy consequences, but we're living in the cool zone right now. So hey, what happens. But what's happening over in Greece?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been massive strikes this last week in Greece. So thousands of Greek transit workers have gone on strike, and it's left like European plane, train, and shipping activities at a standstill. I say European broadly. It's actually kind of broader than that because Greece is a very important logistical point between like Western Europe and Eastern Europe and further east. Like when I flew to Armenia, it was through Aegean Airlines. Like there's just a lot of travel goes through there. This is from the Independent. This is a quote, prices have gone that high that we're buying fewer goods by 10% compared to 2019. GSEE, which is the union, which represents more than 2 million private workers, said in a statement. Quote, we're striking for the obvious, pay rises and collective labor contracts now. Yeah, like the Greek economy has been in the toilet for a long time and has been messed around by larger powers a whole bunch. If people follow Alexis de Loomis, who made Belkaceba, who we interviewed on the show, he actually does a lot of coverage of protest in Greece. And we talked about a massive like clash with the cops, I think a couple of episodes ago that happened earlier this year. But yeah, things have been things have been kicking off in Greece for a while. The Greek left is intense and militant and organized, and it's cool to see. The government, which is conservative, has raised the monthly minimum wage by 35% to €880, but this is just very clearly not enough. The Independent again. The worker's salary only gets us through the 10th or 15th day of the month. It cannot cover basic needs such as housing and food, education and health, said private sector workers representative Dina Gogaki, 52, who joined the protest in the central Syntagma Square on Wednesday. There will also be a 4-hour walkout by EasyJet. Sorry, there was also on the 9th of April, so this has already happened, a 4-hour walkout by EasyJet flight attendants in Italy on April 9th. This caused further disruption. But I think, I mean, the central story here is more just Greece and its ongoing like struggles. But I think that the Greek left is as I said, very active, very militant, and it would be good for us to. I've talked with Alexis. I think I've chatted with Alexis before about maybe us doing an episode about Greece because it's there's clearly a lot to go over there and learn about, and I don't actually see it discussed that much in English spaces. Lastly, from Reuters, Finance Minister Kyriakos Perakakis told an economic conference in Delphi, Greece, that he shared the Greek workers' concerns. Yay, that's great. What are you going to do about it? But that reducing taxation was still a key priority for the government. Reducing taxation.
Scum.
Cool. Yeah, absolute scumbag. Muel, do you want to tell us about Yemen?
Yeah, so the ongoing resistance to the empire is still very, very active, especially in Yemen with Ansar Allah. After the US and UK targeted Ansar Allah strongholds in Yemen with airstrikes earlier this month, the Houthis have retaliated by sending drones and missiles to US aircraft carriers in the Red Sea, not just reasserting their support for Palestine, but also continuing the blockade of the Red Sea in solidarity with the Palestinians suffering in Gaza and the West Bank. The airstrikes against Ansar Allah hadn't actually done that much damage, not in any way limiting Yemen's military capabilities, according to a press release from the Yemeni armed forces. And that quote from that, a couple of quotes from that press release now. Quote, "The armed forces salute our great Yemeni people for their honourable million-man march in Sabine Square and across all squares, affirming their rejection for the American aggression and their confrontation and resistance as a jihad for the sake of Allah and in fulfillment of their religious, moral and humanitarian duty towards the oppressed Palestinian people. Sooner or later, the enemy will realize that the steadfast, struggling people of Yemen do not submit or kneel except to Allah the Almighty, the Compeller. In Allah we rely, and from Allah we seek help," which is just like a super based thing to say. Even if you're like a cringe atheist who doesn't like sort of mentions of God or anything like that, it's just super base to be saying like, the struggling people of Yemen will not kneel to imperial dogs, essentially. Yemen is still cracking on with their resistance there. They have got drones. I saw this reported by the Electronic Intifada earlier this week. They have drones that I think they manufacture themselves with parts from various different allies that they have, possibly Iran. And these drones are super tiny. And Trump's even mentioned these drones when he's been talking about Yemen and talking about US military operations in Yemen, saying, I think, quote, he says, they're remarkable small planes. They make them themselves, and it's like that's how they do it, bro. It's just so funny, like the way that he fucking says shit. These drones have such a range on them. They are like literally they're tiny little things. They're not like the ones that the US or Israel or whoever uses in the region, but they're super tiny, and they can get from Yemen to Israel super easy, and they have been involved in strikes against Israel as well. They've been used in the Red Sea as well. So there's a lot of stuff that Ansar Allah are doing to aid the resistance to the empire in the region. So just a little update from Yemen there. Next up, Tim, tell us about South Korea's incel president. What happened to him?
Yeah, so they finally got him. He was finally impeached. We've done a couple updates over the course of the whole scandal, them declaring martial law, like he had a bunch of other scandals and stuff as well. Like it's basically dodgy president who tried to bring about martial law and then kind of consolidate power with himself and a bunch of friends um, to avoid kind of, like consequences for a lot of this stuff. And there was the huge working class resistance to this attempt to establish martial law, which we saw, everyday citizens confronting armed military police and stuff in some pretty incredible videos. And yeah, he'd been holed up in his house for a long time now because they had an arrest warrant out for him, and he had to, like, he was getting impeached. They had to vote on it and all this kind of stuff. But part of it was like actually physically being like, bro, you are under arrest, and all that kind of stuff. But they got him, which means that there is, I think it was about 60 days from like about just over a week ago. They have to they basically have to get a new president before then. They've got like a countdown. There's a couple front runners. There's a guy that just narrowly lost to him at the last election, but he's kind of like got his own scandals and stuff. But he was a guy, I'm not sure if anyone remembers, on the night of the martial law thing, when all the lawmakers and stuff had to get into the house to vote to take down martial law, there was the guy that climbed the fence to break in. So that's the guy. That's the leader of the opposition. So
He's
kind
my
of
favorite guy in South Korean politics,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
also
yeah,
the
yeah.
only guy I know about in South Korean politics, and he
Yeah.
rules.
He's got a bunch of other scandals against him, like bribery and like property development fraud and
Yay!
all this kind of stuff. But he's the lead. He's the lead opposition at the moment. There's a couple other people, but he's the serious front runner. So so there was a lot of celebrations in South Korea around this. There was some pretty funny signs and things. But it is interesting because Yoon was particularly, like, he was a right-wing populist conservative. He was definitely pushing back against the woke and all this kind of stuff, and part of his plan was basically doing false flag attacks from North Korea to kind of sabotage any kind of attempts for Korean unification or anything like that. So
Woke North Korea.
yeah, woke North Korea. That's it. That guy's gone. But what about the protests over in Hungary, Soph?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a couple of things to talk about here. Last week there was quite a large protest. I mean it was thousands of Hungarians. And then they promised that they would escalate the next week, which should have been this week with a 24-hour shutdown, but not sure if that's happened. Maybe it's still coming, fingers crossed. So basically, Viktor Orban, fascist scumbag leader of Hungary, is trying to outlaw the Pride March, and I don't know. It's one of these things where you're always worried that there'll be a failure of group consciousness, that people just don't know that if they outnumber the cops enough, there's nothing the cops can do. Like, if Pride marches just keep happening and they're big enough, the police aren't going to arrest everyone. And if now I don't live in Hungary and I don't know the law in Hungary, so I'm just, I'm assuming this is legal, but basically if the police grab someone, you just grab onto the police, and enough of you just grab onto the police and until they let the person go. And I assume in Hungary that's legal, because there's not legal in the UK, but obviously Hungarian laws is a whole different thing. And if the police were like, violently repressing someone, you just like come and violently repress the police with like hitting. And I don't know that I assume that's legal in Hungary, but I don't.
If it's not, it
really
should be.
If it's not, well, I mean, if it's not, I don't endorse this. But if the police were trying to grab gay people for going to a Pride March, then you should grab the police, and that would be, I assume, anyway. So I hope that that's like, that there's the kind of group consciousness there to defend LGBT people in that way. Sorry, queer people. it's because I've been reading news articles. It gets in my head. Anyway. There was this massive protest. It was pretty packed. It was a lot of people. They seemed very jazzed about it. Like I say, they haven't followed up, as far as I know, with the 24-hour shutdown yet. The thing I want to mention that I did like was that there's been a comedy protest. So there is a party that's like in the UK. We have the Raving Monster Loony Party, who are just a comedy party who exist to satirize elections and electoral politics. In Hungary, they have two of these at least. I think there might be more. One's called the Fourth Way, like making fun of the third way, and one of them is called the Two-Tailed Dog Party. And so I was reading about this earlier. It said that there has been some interaction between the Two-Tailed Dog Party and the Fourth Way. The Fourth Way is officially led by two birds, and so one of their policies is to eradicate bird flu, obviously. But the two-tailed dog thinks that this is antiviral discrimination. So there is some tension there. The Two-Tailed Dog Party did a protest. Basically, um, uh, a bunch of people dressed in all gray chanting "Let's all be the same" showed up to do this like conformity protest. There was a great quote. They'll read you from this article in Reuters. I would strip queer people of their right to assembly because they're all criminals, said Samuel Tarr, who joined the demonstration with friends, all dressed in grey. They would like to express themselves, which is very harmful. Only I should be allowed to express myself, no one else. There were banners and things that said every problem in the world stems from diversity and individualism and stuff like this. It was very funny. Yeah, I hope that there are more of these, because I think that like when fascists try to pull very overt moves to say like conform, like making fun of them is actually a very powerful tool. But we'll see. So meanwhile, that's Hungary. As I say, it's a very different legal context where obviously is, as far as we know, like probably not illegal to just do anything you want to a cop, just pee on them, just like laugh at them, pull their pants down. But in the UK, we know this is not okay. And so obviously in Hungary, there are horrible fascists suppressing queer people. Muel, what's going on in the UK? I assume it's completely different.
Yeah, no, there's none of that happening in the UK. Everything's fine. Queer people are safe. The safest that we've ever been. Trans people's particularly, there's nothing going on. Don't worry about it. That's all lies, obviously. No, this is unfortunately further awful news regarding attacks on the queer community at large, but specifically trans people, trans kids particularly, which is just, despicable. This is about the NHS UK being told in new guidance to report parents seeking gender-affirming care for their children to safeguarding leads and safeguarding watchdogs. So yeah, this is a lot of this is just taken from Queer AF, which is a pretty good reporting outlet that you can get a lot of sort of news about this stuff with, and there's a lot of extra information from Good Law Project in the article that I got this from. So a lot of this is just straight up from Queer AF. So don't get us done for copying work. This isn't an original Red Planet report. New classified NHS England guidance obtained by the Good Law Project and seen by Queer AF calls on doctors to refuse any care or support like blood tests that enable under 18s to continue using gender-affirming care, including hormones and puberty blockers. So it isn't just about the parents being reported to safeguard, and it's also further closing of loopholes that existed within the law that meant that doctors could provide gender-affirming care for under 18s if obviously they were so inclined. So that's what's going on.
It's not just taking away medicine from children. It is now involving the state to track down children who are trying to get medicine for themselves and punishing them by destroying their families. Yeah. I hate Wes Streeting. There's nothing I don't hope fucking happens to this ghoulish piece of shit. Fuck this guy.
Yeah, he's scum, honestly, and the entire Labour Party is scum for not even remotely trying to stand up for this. Stand up to this, sorry. Yeah, the new advice also tells GPs that it must refuse to support the supply of puberty blockers, and further that it should refuse to support patients who get care from what it deems to be unregulated providers of care that provide both puberty blockers and hormones. So obviously this is NHS guidance just for the NHS. If you're getting private healthcare, obviously private healthcare is different. It's not regulated in the same way as the NHS, so you could get puberty blockers from a private company. You could also source them yourself. You could get DIY puberty blockers, I assume. I don't know. I imagine they're out there. Or you could, purchase them from abroad or whatever, even though that may not be legal. These are things that are just going to happen, because again, we've spoken about DIY hormone therapy on the show before, and it's like, yeah, this is just what's going to happen if you just refuse to, let people get the treatment that they need to live. It is genuinely like just what's going to happen. Like, people are going to get their treatment themselves, and they're going to find ways to get it because the treatments exist. And
even before like trying to ban it, like injectable estrogen has the lowest risk of blood clot of any form of estrogen, and it's literally cheaper to make it for yourself. Estrogen, by the way, isn't a controlled substance, and the information is available online. So it's not a crime to make it for yourself. It's literally cheaper than if you were paying for a prescription from the NHS, because the NHS prescriptions that like have a fixed fee every time you pick up. It would be less, like, and I don't know, it's and plenty of people do it on that basis already, even before like just trying to like fully take it away from people.
Yeah. And so the last sort of part of this that we're sort of reporting on here is the reporting parents and stuff. And the Queer as Fuck says this, building on a practice that had already become part of the picture already, it advises, the guidance now advises that safeguarding, this is quote, safeguarding measures should be considered where the administration of a medicine from an unregulated source presents an immediate safety risk, end quote. This increases the already existing risk that parents may get a safeguarding referral if they continue to support their trans child's care. So I said on Blue Sky yesterday, sort of just like posted into the void about this, that this is the biggest attack on queer people's lives, and the cisgender queer community should see it as an attack on our us as well. Like, trans people are part of our community, and it's absurd that there isn't more of a noise about this from the cisgender queer community. This is the biggest attack on the queer community since Section 28. They will simply refer to the Cass report, which is completely bunk science, when they're questioned about this in any official capacity. And again, that literally calls back to Section 28 when, they were saying, oh yeah, well, we've got all this evidence that if you look at a queer person, you just automatically become gay. Like, and it was all bunk science then, it's bunk science now. It's just the same bullshit again. Scapegoating trans people for, the ills of society, and pleasing who, though?
Wes Streeting is a cis gay man, right? And it's just such a clear demonstration of which fucking side he's picked, which is being white and a man and cis, right? He's picked the side of power, and he's a fucking scumbag coward and a traitor to every queer person who ever lived, every queer person who died of AIDS, every queer person who's experiencing gay bashing, every queer person who's been killed, and then their murderer has used the gay panic or trans panic. He is a traitor to every queer child who has been scared to come out. He is a traitor to every queer person who has ever lived and ever will fucking live, comparable to fucking Nazi gays, to gay fucking Nazis.
He's literally Ernst Röhm. Yeah.
Yes.
So, go on. Were you going to add something there, Tim?
I feel somewhat strongly about this.
I was going to say, yeah. But yeah, it's terrific. And it's the same thing down here as well. Some of the biggest, most vocal kind of TERFs and like kind of political actors in that space are white, cis, gay people. And it's like, man, like, it's like, it's going to be one of those leopards eating your face moment. And you see some of them, they'll tweet out to all their followers something about, like, oh, well, I'm a regular queer person and we don't support this or whatever. And then there'll be all these freaks in their replies being like, you're just as good, you're just the same as them, you're, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, this is the audience you've cultivated, and this is the future that you are building. It's fucking wild. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. So that is the end of the news segment. Thanks for bearing with us there. We had a lot to get through. But yeah, we are a show. We have a Patreon. We would like you to support us. We don't have a lot of money at the moment. And it would be good if that could change. So please go to patreon.com/red_planet and select one of the tiers that you can support us with. It's very good. It's very accessible. There's lots of different options for you, and they're all dead good and have various rewards. Check them out at that link. It's patreon.com/red_planet. But now I guess let's get into the main topic of the show. I don't know how long we're going to spend on this. It could be long. It could be not too long.
Yeah, let's say 45 minutes, I reckon. Yeah, we should give this a bunch of time. Yeah, we're talking about the ZAD, right? We went to the ZAD. ZAD's good. Love ZAD. Big ZAD time. It's worth saying about the Patreon that we went to the ZAD to make a documentary, and more money in the Patreon will help us finish it and get it made and put it out there.
Correct.
And also will help us do future documentaries, which we'd like to do. Like, we're getting some contacts with Christiania, which is like the big squat in Copenhagen, is an urban squat in the way that the ZAD is a rural squat. We could go there anyway.
Yeah.
ZAD
I guess
time.
I guess we should sort of remind people who don't know what the ZAD is. A brief, quick update. I'm happy to do that if you want.
Go ahead. Yeah, tell us.
So the ZAD is ZAD. It stands for Zone à Défense, which is Zone to be Defended. It exists currently as a commune of, I would say, maybe 20 collectives, something like that. Soph, maybe. Yeah, maybe. there's about 200 people living there, from what we were told.
Yes, that's
yeah, it exists, and it's a huge swath of land around Notre-Dame-des-Landes, which is a tiny village in Breton, sort of just north of Nantes, in France. And the reason that it exists there is because basically there was going to be a big freight airport built there, and this was something that had been talked about since the 60s. It got shelved for ages, and then it came back in the sort of late 2000s, and farmers were like, yeah, we're not having that. We've been here for hundreds of years. Our families have been here for hundreds of years. We're going to put a call out to all the crusty anarchists all over France and anywhere else to come and squat on our land and stop this airport from being built. And then after a struggle of about 16 years, maybe longer, they beat the police, various different battles with the gendarmerie, these big Roman legionnaire kind of soldier cops, using quote unquote non-lethal grenades, rubber bullets, blinding hundreds of people, massive tanks trying to evict these people, and a massive resistance of, as we'll talk about later, a broad church of loads of different kinds of people, loads of different kinds of politics, resisted and won. So that is what the ZAD is. Just a little primer there for people who don't know. And we spoke to Jay and Issa, who were massively involved in the resistance and live there now.
And
on the show
they also,
a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and our conversation was about the ZAD, but it was also about their book, which is called We Are Nature Defending Itself. They've been involved in various different movements for a long time. Since the first interview, we've become, ongoing friends. And Jay's talked to me a bunch about being involved in the Reclaim the Streets movement, which is still around in London in a sort of way. It's not like an org that's currently doing stuff or a movement that's currently doing stuff, but the people who were involved in it, there are some old heads kicking around who do stuff that are in association with other orgs. It's similar, there's Sisters Uncut is a big a well-known org that got a lot done in the political activist and organizer landscape of London, but isn't an org anymore, but all the people are around, kind of thing. It's a similar situation to Reclaim the Streets. And then they went from there to Jay and Issa went from Reclaim the Streets stuff. They founded the Laboratory of Insurrectionary Imagination, which comes up with different ways of protest and different ways to deploy different I don't know, ideas and technologies and actions. They founded the Circa, which is the clandestine insurgent rebel clown army. So like, I think that a lot of people, when they're getting like involved in leftist online spaces and they're seeing that there are other ways to protest than just like the classics, like the clown, like clown soldiers and the clown Antifa, like are like some of the most famous images that you see going around. I This is a parallel example. I don't think it has anything to do with Laboratory of Insurrectionary Imagination or Laboffy. But you know, I heard about a while ago something called the Womblies, which is a tactic where people basically wear massive suits that they've stuffed with pillows and stand at the front of any march or like crowd who are facing the police, and other protesters would like take a like running jump into them and knock them into the police really hard. So like the person getting knocked into the police isn't doing anything to the police. They're just being like shoved really hard and they're covered in pillows. So they're like big and round, which is just delightful. More power to people being big and round, I guess. It's the way to defeat the police. But yeah, so I think that, yeah, like Jay needs to have an interesting history. A lot of people on the ZAD have an interesting history. We definitely, like at some point, spoke to people who know, for example, Alexis, people who know like people from the Four Thieves Vinegar Collective who we talked to ages ago on the show about like, control over your own like medical care and information and medical knowledge. Yeah, so it's a place that's really, really plugged in, but it's also like, okay, I guess I've got this in my notes, so I'll go in with my first thing about the discussion here and see if Muel, like this, if this resonates with Muel. I think from my time there, the first visit and corresponding with people, and the time and this time around, it feels like there are two versions of the ZAD, and one of them is this one where like people like fight with the cops and win, and there's like I was holding up this earlier, the cap from a tear gas canister, because it's just like the land there is just peppered with them so much, right? And it's like this site of struggle, and that version is like the scary version that's in all the French state propaganda. Like they told us some really funny stuff about like there was state propaganda that was claiming that they like put razor blades on petanque balls to make weapons and shit like this. It's just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Um, and that version, like it's not just like, in one sense, it's not just that it's the imaginary version the capitalists are scared of, but it's also the version that a lot of people who like care about the politics of the ZAD see it as like, this is the dream of the ZAD, is like fighting and winning. It's like some people there, and certainly some people who left, and this is something that we won't get super into because it's a contentious topic, but like there was this legalization discussion. Well, I will explain more, but it is a contentious topic. We won't get super into it. A bunch of people left the ZAD over it, and it seems like for some of the people who are on that side of things, the ZAD is the site of struggle, and it becoming anything other than a place where people are in tree houses and like fighting the cops is a betrayal in some way, almost. Yeah. And like then there's this very domestic side of the ZAD, which I think that like we captured a bit of in the doc so far, like just by a lot of our chats are about how different and relaxed things felt being there, and like a difference in an experience of time. And it's this liberated territory, right? And that's kind of peaceful. It's not without struggles, either like within the community of people on the ZAD or with it facing the rest of the world. But it is not the like war zone. And I think that's an odd dissonance, I think, is like, because one thing I heard a couple of times is like people, there are people around France who just like think the ZAD doesn't exist anymore because they stopped hearing about it in the news. And like, because when they were hearing about it in the news was when it was a site of struggle. And it's interesting that like for some people that's sort of true. Like if it isn't that thing, it doesn't exist at all. Yeah. And I think that because there's on the first day we were there, we actually saw a documentary that was made by someone called Laurie LaSalle. It's called Forêt Rouge, Red Forest. Should be coming out sometime this year. It was great. I recommend it. And I think it's going to be very different to how our doc is going to come out. Ours is going to be very like informing the English speaking audience that this thing is possible, that just like to do this is possible. And her documentary was like doing something else that was very emotionally evocative and kind of, anyway, it engaged a lot with like art pieces that had been done on the ZAD and stuff like this. And there was a lot of like live like riot and protest footage that she got. But I think that that was still very focused on the struggle, and the struggle has now been not that struggle is over. Right. I don't want Marxists don't come after me, but I'm not saying the struggle is ever over, okay? Jeez. But like the fight with the immediate fight with the police has ended. They won that battle, the airport got cancelled. Because of that, just like that ended. And so the version being shown in that film is not the version that exists now, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things that documentary was really nice. It was really esoteric. It was very like meaningful and emotional, and I don't think you would get like a great idea of sort of everything that the ZAD has to say if you watch that, because it is very focused on that struggle, and now the struggle is basically like,
I think it assumes that people know what the ZAD is already. And
exactly.
How is it going to be telling people this thing exists? And
that's interesting.
Kind of in conversation with some stuff quite integrally.
That's it. It kind of felt like it was made for people on the ZAD, which is fine, because the people should make the people on the ZAD should, or the people that were involved in the ZAD should make stuff for people on the ZAD. But yeah, I think and it's interesting because it's like, you say, it assumes that people know about the ZAD, and actually a few people when we were there said, well, we just don't think anyone knows about us anymore. And it's true. Like, I speak to a lot of activists who are like I've spoken to activists who know people who went to Rojava to fight, like with Alexis de Loomis, and they don't know about the ZAD, which is incredible. So this is something that everybody needs to know. And I've spoken to people since I got back who, are in the squat movement, and I've told them like, look, like Dan Isaac from, Gaskell Garden Project, even like the idea of Gaskell Garden Project, one day the cops could, if they wanted, just come and fucking uproot everything and tear everything down. And it's like, well, how do we actually like get a solid defense of that kind of a thing? And you build stuff, and that's what they did on the ZAD. They built stuff and kept it there and stuff like that. But that's such like an important thing to take away from the struggle of the ZAD, is that like they weren't just squatting a place and then getting evicted and running away and coming back. They were doing that, but they were coming back with like buildings and building stuff, and just kept building stuff, building and building and building. And in some cases, they would build things in like a day. They would build like a frame for a building, carry it in with like 1,000 people holding it, and then just fucking plot it down and fucking twat it up, basically. Just like fire it up just in a day with like all these people working all together. And it's just like fascinating, like absolutely incredible stuff.
Yeah.
And
so I just want to I want to say about the legalization thing quickly, so that I get the topic kind of out of the way of the discussion.
Get it out
here.
of the way.
For those who are for those who are curious about it, basically it was after they won. The French state was like, okay, you won, so you get the land. So we need to know who owns the land, and we need to know who owns which bit of land. And that's like, it's very fair to see this as like a manipulative tactic by the state, because it is, but it's also the state just speaking its own language. Like this is just how the state would understand this. Like, okay, well, you get it, then you have it, And this led to people having this like massive community discourse on the ZAD, that like massive tensions over it, about whether they should legalize and say that they are like, that they do legally own the stuff, sign contracts and so on, or not. To sum up the couple of sides, there's the one side who are pro-legalization and use this metaphor, the body in the coat, which is like the ZAD and everything radical about it, and the people who come there to organize, like Les Soulèvements de la Terre is like a massive, we did a bunch of stories covering the people who are like throwing bombs at police to fight the mega basins in France. Like that's Les Soulèvements de la Terre, right? Like we're organizing on the ZAD and using ZAD spaces and stuff, right? And that's so radical, right? And the legalization is like a disguise, is the idea. That's the rhetoric there, and that's like their side. And then there's people who are like, no, the dream is to be free of the state, and sort of hardline about that. And it's kind of simple to explain why that's their side, right? It's just like, so it's sort of a bit of a ideological and like versus pragmatism kind of argument, but it was like devastatingly controversial for people, and like the whole thing went through really fast, and like some collectives had already decided they were going to do it, and then like so like massive huge tensions, and a lot of people ended up leaving, and we spoke to one or two people who like they had a lot of friends who left their collective and moved off the ZAD, and they don't see them anymore, which is like, let me be clear about this. I'm talking to people, everyone here who lives in capitalist world. It's horrible when you lose a lot of friends. It's really fucking crushingly lonely. But I'm not just talking about friends like you hang out sometimes. I'm talking about friends like on your collective. I'm talking about comrades who you get up every day and they are there.
Yeah.
And you eat 2 massive group meals with them every day, and then they're gone. Like, that's devastating. So,
I mean,
like,
leaving the ZAD was devastating. Like, coming away from that kind of a lifestyle of like, you don't know these people, but you sat there and you're eating with them every day, like 2 meals a day.
God, it's so delightful.
And everyone cooked for each other. We cooked for everyone one night.
Yeah.
It's genuinely like the way that people should live. And it's just like being torn away from that to come back and live in this horrific industrialized,
it's so bad,
convenience-based world. It's like, I mean, there's a lot less slugs on the food, and that was a bad thing for me, but
Mule is terrified of slugs, and I'm sorry to give away your biggest weakness in front of everyone.
That's all right.
It was difficult being in farmland sometimes because Mule is really, really scared of slugs. But like, it was very idyllic, and we had to have a lot of conversations about like, we don't want to overrepresent this place as like utopic, because like it's not so fucking nice here that like we were having such a shock getting there, and then such a shock getting back as well. Like, we've talked about this a bunch. We texted about this a whole bunch, like it being so fucking depressing being not on the ZAD. Like every morning, right? I was waking up with the sunrise. I would go up and climb the lighthouse and watch the sunrise over the fields. And then I would come back down, and I would stick coffee on and make just like eggs on toast with some mustard spread for breakfast for me and Abby. And we'd have our coffees as like people are like getting up and going about to their day. Mule would sleep for another fucking 4 hours.
Yeah.
It was just so peaceful and blissful. And I know like definitely some part of it was like French culture as opposed to English culture. Some of it was like farm culture as opposed to city culture.
Yeah.
But there was also this just like super tangible thing where we were just like, and I've said this to a bunch of people now. I've definitely said this to you, Tim, like that it's island time. Like, as opposed to being like, colonizer, like the commodified discrete hours that are like units of time for capitalist production that we live under, that like we're so used to we don't even see. That like we try to measure up time and weigh it in these like perfectly equal bits, as if 1 hour of your life and another are ever comparable. Like they're not. Like it's except when you're working. Like only fucking work is like that because they make it like that, and like, but like normal human experience isn't, and like is a tapestry and a story, and that like it was just like getting into that and being there, and then coming back and just like, oh yeah, it's time for to watch the clock. Clock time.
Yeah. Like the first thing
about this again.
Yeah, the first thing that I came back to was like universal credit appointments, like the Department of Work and Pensions, and like reminding myself that like, oh yeah, like you have to have a job in order to do anything. And yeah, and I guess actually that's probably quite a good segue into talking about when we spoke to people about their like relationship to labor. We asked people in interviews like how they felt in relation to their labor. I think we only did this twice, and I was sort of like Sophie and Abby weren't in this interview. I went and spoke to someone at a different collective on the last day, Antoine, a guy who was doing farming and stuff, and they both seem to have like quite a similar sort of idea of it, which is so interesting because no one's working for money there. People are farming to make food so that they can eat, so that their collective friends, their friends in the various different collectives can eat. And the only money that is asked for is €2,000 a year. Which is like the running costs of the farm, like if things break down or they have to buy stuff from outside of the ZAD. And that's really like not a lot. Like, what is that? Like fucking, I don't know, 200 euro a month or something kind of thing. It's
like
really negligible.
Even if people were paying individually, it would be like on collectives.
Yeah.
There are often like 10 people in a collective, right? And so it'd
Yeah.
be like €200 from each person
Yeah.
versus like that's like half my food bill of the month,
Yeah.
like of the month, like, and this is
Yeah.
like it, yeah. In some ways it's just a fairly normal cooperative model, but it's
Yeah.
I mean they have control of their own land and are living there, so it's also not
Living
not
living intentionally is what we were calling it, right? It's intentionally like, we are growing food to feed ourselves. We are shitting in a bucket to make compost and using that to grow various things.
I think that like opening up a possibility space is what we're trying to do with this documentary. We're trying to get people to understand that you can just make decisions that lead you to living in a different way. You can. It's super achievable. It's like earlier when I was saying that like making injectable estrogen is cheaper than your prescription and that it's medically better if if it's done right. Like this is what I mean is like these possibilities are actually super achievable, and like people are really scared of doing something that's completely different, and they feel like they're not being like not having kind of the reassurance or insurance of other people or bigger systems or whatever. But just as soon as it clicks for you that you can, and when my interview with Maggie that aired in the last episode, like when she said that great thing about the like eating in the future, like finding other ways to eat that are not the capitalist system for all your meals, and suddenly all your food is in the future. It's in the new way of living. Yeah, just like you got to get people to click that that's it. You can make these decisions, and they are actually achievable with not that much work. It's never been about it being hard work. It's always been about you being scared that like it just won't be as reliable as what you have now. But like it will be better because what you have now is collapsing.
And also like the thing that sort of links into that, which is the relationship that people have to their labor on the ZAD. What it seems to be from the couple of people that we spoke to about it, is that actually the trauma that capitalism inflicts upon you, and it does inflict a trauma on everybody actually. Like, and I spoke to someone on the Equinox ritual about this, who's a therapist for activists. Is the thing that sort of lays over when you stop working in the system, and you start working like on the ZAD, for example, and you might only be working like 3 days a week, or 4 days a week, or when you're working those 3 days, you might only be doing like 4 hours a day or something. And you start to like say to yourself, shit, I'm not really actually doing any work and everybody's working harder than me. And that is capitalist trauma. That's trauma that the system says to you, like, oh, everybody needs to be working so hard all the time, every day. Otherwise you're just not a productive member of society. And that's the main sort of thing that people seem to say that they struggled with, in sort of transitioning out of that sort of mode of labor to an intentional living mode of labor, which is really interesting. And I guess like the way that I sort of think of that is that like it's gonna be different for like a lot of people, because I think like some people like me are very anti-work, and I've always been very like, work sucks, fuck this, I don't want to do anything, I'm gonna get away with doing as little as possible in this job, because it sucks.
But if that was your attitude, 1 day of farm labor per week, and the rest you can do whatever the fuck you want. It's like a really good deal, actually.
Exactly. That's what I mean. I would be like, yo, if I just have to get over, do 1 day of farming every week, you best believe I'm going to be at that farm 6 a.m. sucking the day's dick. Like
it's
getting
actually
those
like a
crops.
huge thing that a lot of like both like European historians and also like like ethnographers and all this kind of stuff have talked about when like observing cultures that exist outside of the capitalist mode of production, is that rest time is like so much more, and like also the cultural space allowed for rest time is kind of like, there's like more like, I guess, like group activity kind of things that are just like, like that's where the space for things like hanging out and like making music together and all that kind of stuff would come from, or just like collaborating on artistic and creative things as well. And yeah, there's like this misconception that like back in the day peasants would be like just grueling back to back like farm work constantly and stuff, and it actually, that only kind of became their life under like later stages in feudalism towards capitalism, when things started like ramping up and you get these like like the baron landlord kind of guys that are like, no, we need you to crank out those cash crops. Like when it was like people like living largely on the commons and doing their own things, like a lot of the time they were just chilling, like
Yeah, of course, because why wouldn't you? It's just
Yeah.
this is something we definitely talked about, was like when time is commodified like this, like you have the commodified amount of rest time as well. It's
Yeah.
like the time to be a human being is like we were we were there. I can't remember how it kind of came up, but we were talking about this and we were talking about just like how this was time when we were just being people and we could just be and just do whatever we wanted, and the immense, like the speed with which we went through like intense, like I was like moving through like some trauma stuff in the week we were there. I had a couple of nights where I had like intense dreams, and I got up and I like a couple of times tried to like send messages to people who like I've had a falling out with, and like I was like, one of them is like is just having an ongoing mental health thing, and I was just like, oh right, I can't actually do the healing on both sides of this relationship, and that's okay, but we'll still chat, but she's having a tough time, but we were just talking about, yeah, just like being a person and having that time. And then I think it was that Abby said to me, like, if you could just, if you had the choice to do an hour of work or an hour of being a person, you would always choose this one. And I was like, yeah, but capitalism tells you that you can have like this many hours of work, and then you can have your allotted hours of being a person that you're allowed to be a person in, and that's still not actually any time being a person, because it's an hour that's been sold to you as a thing, like you get this, here's your reward, time to be a person. It's like, fuck no, I can't do it in that time. I need my whole life, actually give me my life back. Fuck.
This is kind of what the science around burnout says, isn't it? That like actually if you are burnt out, you're not going to recover if you take the allotted 28 days holiday that you might get from your capitalist permanent contract. You need like a year to recover from something like that, and you need like a good environment in which you can do that. Possibly with therapy, possibly with other kind of like therapeutic things, leisure, going to the gym, submersing yourself in some mud for a bit. I don't know. It's this is the thing. It's like if you genuinely have that time to heal,
the old dwarf confirmed. Just his idea of relaxation, just get into the earth.
Yeah.
Just get into the mud and get in reborn.
There. Get in there, wriggle around a bit, stay away from slugs. They're the main enemy.
Mule goes all the way into the mud and comes out again, and he looks like a little different, but you can't quite tell. Like this might be another guy who just looks a lot like Mule, but you can't quite tell. So we should talk about the phone's nailed to the ceiling, because we met a guy who has no phone and no bank account, and we were walking away from talking to him, and we were just like, oh my god, he's free. He's free. We just talked to a free guy. We just talked to a free man, an actual person who's actually free.
And it was kind of so funny how we found out, because I think I was just like, he was showing us around the blacksmith, and he was like, oh, you missed it because the fire's not on today, and it's really beautiful. Like this guy was definitely a dwarf, because he was like so into like forging things. He
Tolkien dwarf, real.
He fucking loved it. He was like, oh, the fire was on the other day and you missed it. It's so beautiful. And he was showing us all these tools. nails and knives and shit. Yeah, go on.
I have a point here about the relationship to labor, just a technical one. It'll probably go into the documentary when we, but it's just he was telling us that he did a thing called an atelier école. So there are a couple of different work school things they do on the ZAD. So there's the chantier école, and école obviously in French means school because I know French. And the chantier école is like the work site school. So you're learning skills to do something by taking part in a project. It's usually like a building, and then you're putting it up together, and then you'll have a big feast to celebrate and all this. And then the atelier école is more of a workshop style, like school lesson kind of thing. And so he was doing atelier écoles to like let people like forge their own like nails, like actually like pour the metal and shit. It's so cool.
Yeah. And I was saying like, oh, is it going to be on this week because we're here till Saturday? Can we take a look at the fire when it's on or something? Maybe I can get your number. And he was like, I don't have a phone, bro. And then like later on, I think we were like, I can't remember what we were talking about. We were saying something like, "Oh, how does it work? Are you, is it a co-op here? And like, do you get paid?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't have a bank account." It was just like,
man.
He's free. He's completely unplugged. He's like Keanu Reeves' bald baby man in the Matrix.
Sometimes when you talk to libertarians, you see like that they have this real spark in them, this real passion for like, I want to be free. I want fuck all this. Like I hate this, and I want to be free of it. And then you like the only way you're ever going to meet someone who's actually all the way free is communism. Like just it's the only way it's going to ever happen.
You meet this crusty anarchist dwarf guy, and he's like, "I'm actually free."
Exactly. We were there, and we were just shooting like B-roll, like while he and Muel were chatting. And we noticed on one of the beams of the ceiling, someone had gotten like a railroad spike like nail and just driven it through a smartphone into the ceiling. And they'd done this like with 4 different phones, but also get this, right? One of them was like an iPhone 1. One of them was like a BlackBerry. One of them was like a super old, the like little white clamshell looking Android phones, super old. And like these were the phones that were up there. So it was just like, this is how long they've been there. Is like this is when they like hammered up their smartphones, is that like, they look old as
historical
shit now.
record
And like we were walking away from that. Actually, this is the Fisher thing I wanted to talk about. As in Mark Fisher.
This might blow some people's minds. So just make sure you sat down.
No, it's so
drink
silly.
A juice.
No. Drink some slug juice. Just get a nice sip of compressed slugs. Okay, no, this is like a phones but too much thing, but it's also like a very powerful bit of leftist theory that I really enjoyed from a book I read. So it's like Mark Fisher's Post-Capitalist Desire, which is the transcript of his last lectures. And he was talking about how capitalism has to mediate things, right? Like, the saying that like the people who make the most money in a gold rush are the people who sell shovels, right? And it's the same thing. Like capitalism gets more power if it controls the supply of something to you rather than just like you getting the thing. And so like it's all about mediation and being the medium through which you get stuff rather than the immediate, right? If you live on the commons, on a peasant farm on the commons in, medieval Europe, then if there are fruit trees and they're growing fruit, you just go pick one, right? But capitalism is now the vehicle through which you get the orange off the tree. And this is like, as opposed to the immediate, which is just like what you experience with your senses, like literally your 5 senses, is there something which is controlled by capital in between you and that? And then Fisher goes like, so things like the social, right? Like talking to you right now, and this is a transcript you're reading in a book you've bought, right? But he's talking to these students. He's like, so like me talking to you right now, is there a way that capitalism could like mediate that? And he like pulls out his smartphone. He's like, through some kind of social medium, right? And it's just like, fuck, no, they got us. Like literally the way we just like talk to each other. And like, this is like, that one hit me really hard because especially like doing the job I do, like so much of it was on screens, and then I'm like putting my image out to be watched by other people on screens, and like, you know, right now we're all on a Zoom call to each other to like make this podcast, and like it's been a historic place when I've been having like really bad mental health episodes where I've like derealized because I'm just like, all of this is just screens. Like I think I'm like talking to my friends, but I'm not talking to my friends. I'm talking into a microphone and into a camera on top of my screen in my house, and my friends are like so far away. And like you can absolutely view that as like, wow, the miracle of communications technology. But it's also like it's all facilitated through capital, and capital controls all of it. And that's like horrible. And again,
it's
I know
like it's even like going to the
episode
pub.
1 Black Mirror stuff, but it's no, exactly. Even the pub. But it's still a capitalist place. Like it's still a place where
because it's not a third space. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that sort of like level of you know, I guess lack of alienation is like the main thing that we sort of observed there. It was like, yeah, you know, lots of people here just are not interested in being on Twitter or Facebook or posting or you know, even like doing websites or whatever. Don't get us wrong, there was definitely a lot of Zoom calls going on, but they were having meetings with other collectives about stuff that needs to be done. You know,
no, real. It's like you just made this joke in chat, and sorry to do chat when we always got this tension on Red Planet of the live chat versus the podcast later.
Don't mention the live chat.
But Muel's just made this joke, right? If you tried to explain Linux servers to a Z East, you would probably be asked to leave the ZAD forever. But like the extremely real version of this is that like a lot of people online think that like the biggest defeat of the revolution was when like this streamer got called out for saying slurs on stream, and so doesn't get to be like the biggest streamer anymore and change the world with his posts. And it's like if you were trying to explain like the debate, like some like debate stream drama to a ZAD, the real, you wouldn't be asked to leave ZAD, right? But just like
they would look very upset. Yeah.
They would just be like, wait, no, what?
What are you talking about? Why are you trying to explain this to me? Are you okay? Do you need to be thinking about this much? Yeah.
The only times that we talked about Elon Musk on the ZAD and like Trump and Musk, well, one, when we recorded our bonus episode, which should be up for the Patreon sometime soon. I came over and hotboxed Mule's caravan, and he was like, "Can I leave?" And I was like, "No." And we talked about Elon Musk and things going badly for him, and had a laugh about it for the podcast. And then the other time was like when we were doing farm labor, and we were just having an idle chat with people just to like entertain ourselves and have a laugh about like. When we were doing this, like one of the other people doing farm labor was like, so how do you think Trump is going to fall apart? Like, what do you think is going to, like, just started the conversation that way. And like the rest of the time, conversations are just not about that. They're just like about the pragmatic, immediate, like application of strategy for revolution.
Yeah.
And for just living and just, you know, just living your life, you know?
The biggest sort of conversations that we had was like when I was telling people about comrades in prison for Palestine action in the UK and what they were doing, and the Zaddists were like, "Oh wow, they're doing that kind of thing. That's really cool." Like every single one of them was like, "Whoa, that's great in Britain." What? So that was like that was pretty funny. Yeah, but those are the conversations that matter, right? You know, those are the actual conversations that matter. It's not like, you know, what Asmongold said, or you know what Nazi destiny fucked this week.
I'm trying to imagine trying to explain Asmongold to someone.
You know, it's like that. It's like if you try to explain, yeah.
And they're just walking away from me the whole time, and I'm just like, "Where are you going?"
No, you need to know.
The
You need to know about how smelly and stinky this guy is and the things he says. It's like if you tried to explain like debate bros to a Zadist, you'd be like, "Oh, so there's these guys," and you just give up. You know, you would
just look across at the forest and like the moon hovering in the sky in the early morning over the forest that's like belongs to the Zadists, where they harvest their own wood to do their own lumber projects, to construct community centers, to like do nice things together, and you'd be like, So there's this guy, and what he does is he logs on to the. You know what? Never mind.
Yeah, fuck it.
I'm gonna go for a walk. I'm gonna go for a long walk in the
Yeah,
forest.
I'm gonna go in the swamp and see if I can find out what made that loud noise when it slipped into the water before. It sounded like some big animal that I've never heard of before. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like, yeah, you're just not bothered about any of that stuff because you're just there like if any of those guys came here, they would like criticize it and say, "Oh, it's like a cult," or you know what? Like they
They'd
wouldn't
probably
even.
just have the same. They'd probably just be like struck by it being incredible in the same way, and then
Yeah,
they'd
yeah,
also
yeah.
be like, "Oh my God, everything I do is fucking bullshit." I had a bunch. I had plenty of just like hating like being a poster while I
Yeah.
was there. I imagine it would just be worse for those guys. I was just like,
Mm.
oh my God, I've spent so much of my life posting. What the
I
fuck?
I said
Yeah.
I also had that same sort of
Yeah.
like moment. I was like, "Oh God, you just don't need to be on social media at all."
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, God.
You're like a
Oh,
second away from just hammering a nail into your phone at this
so
point.
close. If I didn't have to catch a flight and I was having like
Yeah.
fucking mad anxiety about it, I would have done it. Yeah.
When I go back to the ZAD for good, when I finally am just like, that's it, I'm just staying. The first thing I do is I'm gonna get my phone and just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have to
That's it.
forge your own nail first?
Oh my God, that
Yeah,
would be perfect. That would be such
that's
a good
it.
tradition.
Yeah, it would, wouldn't it? That would be a
Forge your own
proper thing.
nail, destroy your own phone,
Yeah.
take up your Zadist name,
Mm.
learn to ride the slug. Um, anyway, yeah, so that's it. We're
Yeah.
making a documentary about the ZAD. It's gonna be
Mhm.
fucking cool as hell. It's a cool as
Mm.
hell place. Mule, do you have any more concluding thoughts about
I
our
mean,
time there?
yeah. I mean, yeah. Obviously, we do like this. I think it's absolutely right to wrap it up there and not go too much into it because, yeah, the documentary is really going to cover like the majority of it. We got so much
Yeah.
footage. We got so much interview time with people. Yeah, I guess like the main sort of reflection that I had that I've not mentioned so far is sort of like the pragmatism and the broad church nature of the ZAD. Like, um, you know, Jay said something in the first time that Soph went to the ZAD to see them, and it's in the edit that I was doing earlier, where they were talking about how purity is the antechamber of fascism, and you can really sort of see that in like broader organizing, in that like there is a certain expectation that people have on organizations and protest movements in the imperial core and also not in the imperial core as well to be like perfect and have absolutely everything right and do everything right and never make any mistakes, and it's just so completely unreasonable. And I think there was a Red Planeteer who was asking in the Discord a couple of days, like, where do I find my people, where do I find my people to organize with? And it's like, you can definitely, this was your advice, so like you could definitely get in a room with people that you all agree with and like do a thing together, but that
Oh
isn't
yeah, no, it's a
isn't
great
building a yeah.
basis for a book group
Yep.
or uh an anarchist affinity group that's gonna sabotage the water pumping station on some fascist thing to stop fascist stuff happening.
Yeah.
There is stuff you can do with people you 100% agree with, but and if you all live close to each other, you could even be a community.
Yep.
But if but you can never be like a union
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there are other things that by definition bring other people in based on issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like structure-based organizing literally dictates that you are in a place with people who do not necessarily agree with you. And that is the struggle of like revolution. The struggle of revolution is not just go and see people and just sit with people that you agree with and agree with each other over and over again until you end up hating each other because you don't quite agree with like the tiny specific things, and then all that falls apart. Like you sit with
Yeah.
people who like it is going to make you feel uncomfortable. They're going to say things that make you feel uncomfortable, and you have to like learn the right way to discuss that, learn the right way to challenge it, learn the right way to sort of focus people's anger on the right things.
Yeah. I mean, I think
it's tough.
this is a tendency that orgs go through, and I've seen it a bunch of times. I've been around the kind of conflicts where people want, this person pushed out of a space because they're bad, right? Or like, or they said a wrong thing, or they're whatever, in whatever way. It's like a calcification that happens when too many like self-selecting activists, right? They want their thing to be that they're an activist and an organizer, and so they're getting involved with this org because it's a stable org. But then the thing is, a whole bunch of people are also making that decision at the same time. So that org is becoming a place that's full of people whose politics are so similar, which is a good thing because we need a bunch of revolutionaries to agree, but we need to also be pragmatic, that they lose sight of what the org is there for.
Yeah.
And like, do we need to be like litigating tiny problems that are just, rather than being like, this thing is union business and this thing is just not union business, like that,
Yeah, it has to be a broad church and a big effort of lots of different people doing lots of similar things. Yeah, so that's that. Well, listen, thanks for listening to our reflections on the ZAD. Tim, sorry it wasn't a very Tim heavy episode, but I think you had some good contributions to make anyway, as per. Yeah, so don't forget, we're a show that needs your help. We have a Patreon, and we would like you to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/red_planet. There's various different tiers that you can support us with. We also have merch. If you go to mercenarycreative.com, and you can get one of our tote bags, one of our hoodies, one of our t-shirts. Queer Existence is Resistance. It's a really good design, done by Tim and Sophie. It's really good. I've got one. It's mint. You should also have one so we can be friends. And there is one tier of Patreon support that we thank at the end of every episode. So thank you very much to Risk Inverse for being our sicko. Thank you so much for supporting us at the highest tier of support. You are a legend. We love you very much. And if you want to support us as well, you could support us individually. You can support our hosts. And Soph, I want to know where, if I was a Red Planet listener / viewer / chatter / watcher, where would I support you the most?
The most would be patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. That is, I'm a video essayist. That's the thing I do. Everyone knows video essayists take 10 years to make one video. That's what I'm currently doing. But I'm working on 2 videos at the moment. So, I'm working twice as hard for the next 10 years on my 2 videos. And one of them is about the Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson, which is my favorite fiction story. I think it would be fair to say that broadly. And it's about a revolution on Mars. Well, it's about a series of revolutions on Mars. It's pretty fucking cool. I'll be explaining in the video. If you already know about it, then you should already be excited for the video. If you don't know, you can watch the video and then you'll find out, and then you'll be really excited. But I think you should read the books first, and you have some time because I'm slow as fuck. You have some time to get them all read before I release the video. But I've been doing like a bunch of stuff for this. I built a bunch of the like the sci-fi stuff from the series in Kerbal Space Program to make visuals, and like it coincides with me getting really into like astrophotography, and I got a telescope and he's showing some astrophotography and processes that I've been doing in the video. There's that, and there's also the Mad and the Mentally Ill, which is my kind of personal writing on madness and mental illness and what we need in the revolution in terms of our approach to psychology to change in order to really be abolitionists and really be revolutionaries. That's all gonna be available in its various stages of writing and behind the scenes stuff and production, and then pre-release and then release at patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. But all my links are linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars. Tim, it has not been a Tim heavy enough episode. I'm a massive Tim head. I'd like to find out where there's more Tim. Tim me up.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitch or YouTube as Conquest of Dread, or over on Twitter and Blue Sky as Dread Conquest. Twitter is probably where I'm most active. Lots of shit posting on there. Yeah, that's kind of the center of all my stuff. What about Muel? Where can we find more Muel info?
Thanks, Tim. It's linktree.ee/DJ Mule. I'm not really doing much work at the moment until I get a job. But when I get a job, I'm going to be going right back to my projects, including Bastard Landlord Influencers and another video sort of on British fascism and reform. And the fact that that's all probably coming our way next year. So yeah, look forward to that. And yeah, thank you so much for watching our show. Peace.
Thanks.
Solidarity.
Bye.
See you in the next one.